Well, well. Watched a video last night by someone who I believe is reasonably, well, probably extremely well known. Their thoughts on Short Bus, and you know, they believed he had the potential to be the next Pulse nightclub shooter. Now, not all of yous know, but some of yous do. I've got two aunties who are not all they could have been. And I don't mean they're white trash who's on drugs or anything like that. Thank God we don't have any of those in our family. Thank God. Well, one of them is basically a bit backwards, probably about the mind of an 8-year-old. Although they did manage to make it through normal schooling. And in fact, they used to laugh at the kids going to the special school, but my grandmother wasn't going to tell them that they were just about going to go there themselves, except, well, you know, they decided, my grandma herself decided that it would be better if this auntie was to go to a regular school. And that did help her, but we'll talk about potential in a while. The other one has recurrent schizophrenia, and most of the time she's a bit of a dinner, but she's alright, so long as she stays on the meds. But if she's not on the meds, she has, you know, maybe if she were to take no medication whatsoever and none was available, she'd probably be schizophrenic 2 to 3 months of the year. It comes and goes. And she's pretty good at deciding that she's going to find excuses not to take it. The pills hurt me throat, blah, blah, blah. All this sort of lame excuses. But I want to get to the point of talking about mental people living in everyday society. Now, as some of you also know, my sister's, you know, got a degree in psychology. She spent 4 years getting that and come out, I believe, with honours. Yeah, she done quite well there. But back in the day, back in the 1800s, you were considered, if you had issues and you were considered insane, that was it. They just threw you in a friggin' mental institution, and that was it. You spent the rest of your life inside some shithole old stone building, and you didn't have any life. And there was a point where they decided, rightly or wrongly, I sometimes think it may be wrongly, that all mental disorders were an illness, and as they were an illness, they could someday be cured, but, you know, we just got to treat them like they're a sick person until they're better again. And while that is the case with, you know, postnatal depression and a number of these other things, there are some things that are not just an illness, but they're part of the way the brain's permanently wired, and it's fucking permanent. And you ain't gonna just sort of real dependency mentality, real government dependency ideology of, you know, well, you're sick, so we're going to treat you as though you're sick, and we're going to give ourselves a job for the rest of our life in the purpose. Now, it wasn't necessarily a government employee who came up with this idea. This idea was sprouted long ago, and it may well have been sprouted at the turn of the century, that, and I have read who come up with that idea, that, you know, they are ill and they need to be treated, and at some point, you know, you're supposed to have a patient who one day gets better, but let's face it, some of these characters never get better because it's the way the brain's hardwired, and that's it. Like, you can't get my retarded auntie and say, or my backwards auntie rather, she's not technically retarded, she's just backwards, and say, well, we're going to cure you, because there is never going to be the day that she is going to be good enough to do a complicated tax form or anything like that. Yeah, so that's why I don't really agree with the whole idea that they're just sick per se, because they're the patient that you can treat forever and they're never going to get better. But as you know, I'm sure plenty of people like this idea, especially when their job depends on having people who are quote unquote ill, who are never actually curable, ever. Like backwards people, like retarded people, like people with some permanent disability, whether physical, mental, or both. What I will say though is, one thing Donald Trump said in one of his motivational speeches is that he believes that everybody, this is pre-president, he used to, give motivational speeches, and that everybody has some potential to be something and be productive in one way or another. Everybody has it. Now, I don't agree that everybody has it, because there are some people that I've seen who are able-bodied and can't fucking work out their ass from their head. Like, they're unemployable. Having said that these people are unemployable, it doesn't mean that they should be institutionalized. But I believe that everybody who can do something should do something. Now, let's face it, there's a lot of people out there who ain't going to be experts at, filling out complicated shit. They're not going to be engineering fucking aircraft anytime soon. But having said that, I hate this idea of everybody just being a lame duck, because I believe that even though some are unemployable and some don't have a great mental capacity, everybody should do to the best of their ability what they can do to help themselves. Because I'm sick to fucking death of paying taxes for people who could do more, but decided they couldn't be fucked and they'd rather just leech off welfare. And one of the things that have been typical government fuckwits, they were getting people in this country a couple of years back when we had our glorious, if you want to call it glorious, only the feminists thought you were glorious, female Prime Minister. And we got this female Prime Minister, and all these feminists, even my mum got approached by a feminist. Oh, are you going to vote for her because she's a woman? Well, my mum said, well, I believe her policies are crap and she doesn't know what she's doing, so no. But during that time, she left-wing government and all that business, and they actually, and I've seen an emergence of, you heard of the military-industrial complex. I've heard of seen an emergence of the frickin' government education complex, where the education system has decided to pretend that it is the answer to all economic woes, and that, everything should revolve around them, and add more bureaucracy to the situation, and you need licenses for everything, and and the next thing they're pushing the narrative that you can't do anything unless you've got this qualification and that and all they've done is just the only thing that's benefited, no one's got any more jobs, nothing's gone ahead more. They haven't even used the word entrepreneur in the whole lot. All they've just decided is that more education is the answer to things. And you wouldn't believe it, but they spend $30,000 to $50,000 a year getting people like my auntie, who are backwards, and putting them in education in the hope that they were going to get a job. It's bullshit. They didn't have the mental capacity to write 3 entire sentences, let alone go ahead and become a qualified blah blah and then just go and get a job. They completely missed the fucking point. And truckloads of money was wasted trying to educate people who did not have the mental capability, while people who did have the mental capability had to pay for it on their own. What the fuck is that? Sometimes you've got to pay on your own, sometimes there's different ways and means that you can get through, and it'll be government funded as a normal person. But, you know, this is the thing. They had people who didn't have the capacity and they wasted a lot of money trying to train people who didn't have the mental capacity. Now, although these people, not everybody has the mental capacity to do everything, I really believe that those who can do something, like my auntie, for instance, when she went to a public school, one of the things that did stick in her mind was maths. And in all of this, you know, some people say, oh, you know, you put them in a home or this or that, or some sort of sponsored care, and, you know, you got all these frickin' government employees, you know, they're sort of giving themselves a job, basically. And, you know, just the pure ability to manage money and know that I can go to the shop and buy this and go to the shop and buy that, and knowing what things cost and being able to add the money up and knowing when her fortnightly payment comes through and all that, she sort of has managed to pretty much live life herself and look after herself. Now she's in a little government flat, public housing or whatever, but she can, you know, go to the bank, get money out. She goes and gets her own food. Okay, she in the past has smoked far too many cigarettes, and you know, she lives off a lot of gas station food, if you know what I mean. You know, she's going and buying a lot of takeaway shit, a lot of hot dogs, a lot of milkshakes, and they're not the best. But in this, they've avoided employing another freaking government employee to look after them. But there's an even bigger point to this. They have a lot of these places here, and I think there's one of them that went bankrupt, I don't know how, where they employ people who aren't the full two bob. And let's face it, I've been to one of these places, because one of them was a paper recycling place, and as part of a job I had, I went there and dumped off a huge amount of paper. And quite simply, you go to these places and these people aren't working. They're just standing around talking to each other. But they're more worried that it gives them a sense of fulfillment that they feel they've got a job. Now the reality is that some of them are paid $4 an hour with, you know, like, let's face it, I'm on like $24.50. There's some people that work on $25.50, and you know, these people were being paid $4 an hour, and one poor side with that, and you notice they dropped it to $2 an hour, but they sort of don't take any of their pension off them. So you can sort of understand that they don't get a great deal of money, but they, you know, it gives them a sense of doing something. But the reality is that a lot of them aren't even doing anything productive, because these places are so heavily subsidised to take them on, you know, that they're basically a net loss. And one of these joints even still went bankrupt, even with all this extra, you know, money splashed into it. And you look at it all and you say, it's ridiculous. You know, it is a waste of money. But just for sheer living on their own, you know, and even working in an unskilled job, you know, maybe 10 hours a week, 15 hours a week, I think it's a good idea to have people do all they can do, you know, because this sense of being able to look after yourself and live on your own, and, you know, even hold down a job doing something very basic, whether it's, you know, folding towels or whatever at the local hotel, or, you know, making beds or whatever. It gives them a sense of achievement. I don't like the idea of giving them a job that is just more government subsidies and more wasted money, but I think that everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people have a lot of potential, and all their potential should be found out and given to them for the sense of achievement and self-confidence, because that achievement and self-confidence is what keeps them going on. You take everything away from them, you put them in a mental institution, or you put them in some assisted care home or some bullshit, all of a sudden you've taken away their independence, you've taken away their sense that they can do things themselves, that they can go and cook some sausages on the frying pan themselves, that they can do something. And when that self-confidence disappears, they sort of just fall in a heap, and then they become dependent, because they had what skills they did have and what they could do for themselves, and that they were proud to be able to cook themselves sausages or whatever. You've taken that away from them, and then it's just like, you know, they're like a blimmin' wet rug. They just go flop, and that's it. You know, then what? Then well, it's another government bureaucrat wasting my tax dollars to look after somebody who could have looked after themselves, but had it all taken away from them because some government bureaucrat found that they could talk themselves into a job. You know, and there's another idea that the other auntie, by the way, the one with the schizophrenia, she's been living on her own for years, and the only thing really strange that she has, aside from the ability to complain about such minor issues in her life that it's ridiculous, and worry about this cat she's got that's as old as hell and really more of a pain in the arse than a benefit. The only other thing she really has is bizarre sleeping patterns, and she worries a lot about stupid minor things that average people wouldn't worry about. But part of that is, as I've seen in even another couple of family friends who have got, you know, troubles, that their world's too small, and it's been shown in a lot of cases that, and there's people who even recognise it in themselves, the less, particularly guys who are retired, the less stuff you have to worry about, the more you get wound up over minor things. There's a guy who was a company CEO, well, he was a high-flying corporate lawyer, I think, and he was worried about, you know, CEO packages and this and that and merger deals, and, you know, he was all over it on that. And then he retired, and then he basically transferred that worry and effort into making his garden look absolutely immaculate. And he'd be all, oh, I've got to do this to the garden. And he said, you know, here I was, I realised I was almost as flustered over my garden as I was over some of these corporate takeovers that I was writing up all the blooming contracts for and all the paperwork for. You know, and this is the thing. Some people, their world is too small, and, you know, there's another person who this auntie knows who is schizophrenic, and so is this guy's girlfriend, and, you know, they have too little an amount of stuff on their plate, and they get worried about minor stupid things, you know, and a lot of this is because they've got nothing else to do, you know, and it's as simple as that. So the more they're given to do and the more they have to look after themselves, the less they worry about stupid stuff as well. What else was I going to say? Yes, there's another guy I used to work with who believed that he had a belief that there's no such thing as people who are mental. He had an idea that your brain has many different areas, and those who, you know, he used to talk about autism, people that have got low social function and abilities in one area. He always believed when they had a dull ability in one area, they had a heightened ability in another. So he said there's some autistic people that are no good socially and just with general day-to-day things, but they'll be absolutely rocket scientists in another area. And his belief was that everyone who had a mental disorder had another huge potential area. Everyone. Now, I don't necessarily believe that, because when you see people who are frickin' literally wheelchair-bound retards, man, well, yeah. No, there's not any other area that they excel in, and they've, you know, done a lot of tests, and yeah, well, there isn't an area that they excel in. But I believe he's partially right, and I believe there are cases where he's definitely right, where people have a dull sense in one area and a brilliant sense in another. And while I'm quite certain that our old friend Shortbus has some mental problems, and I believe, as I've shown previously, that it's to do with schizophrenia, there's no reason why he couldn't pick up shit and do things for himself, because while his ability to maintain good hygiene and a number of other things is dulled, I believe that he's, you know, he's got potential in other areas, particularly in the areas of sales. I believe this guy could sell snow to the Eskimos. I really do, you know, and as opposed to just institutionalise the guy. And I don't really think he's going to go nuts and friggin' flatten people over no chicken shawarma. But what I do think is that, regardless of that, I don't believe that he's going to run over a bunch of people when he doesn't get enough chicken shawarma, isn't so much that, you know, his increased desperation to, or previously increased desperation to try and push for more donations and hound people over it, and just all he'd done at one point there was just sort of raise things up higher and get more frantic. You know what that is? That's a sign of his world becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. That's because he blocked everyone except the handful of people on the bottom of YouTube, and, you know, as a result, all he had was a whole bunch of moderators who would fight amongst themselves, to be quite honest. And his world had gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And when their world gets smaller, they get more panicked and more desperate, and they get more wound up over minor things. And this is another big thing that's the root of a lot of this. The smaller your world gets, the less opportunities you can see and the less options you can see. And that, in essence, is why so many people are trapped in their life, because all they see is, I can't do that, I can't do that. You read these Robert Kiyosaki books, he said, I've done this thing and that thing, and people say to me, well, you can't do that in this country. Oh, that's illegal. And he says, hey, I just told you I have already done it. This is not an idea that I'm telling you could do. I've been doing this for 5 years. He even had a friend of his write him a letter and tell him that he couldn't possibly do such and such because he's wasting his money. And this friend found some 6% deposit certificate of deposit, or whatever they call them, for some investment fund, and he was so proud that he found that. And he turned around and said, oh, it's bullshit, I make 14% on another particular thing. And this friend wrote him a letter and said, oh no, you can't possibly do that and you're stupid and you'll lose your money. And he's trying to say to the friend, I've done this for 7 years now. Don't tell me, oh, this, that. I've been doing it for 7 years. It's not that, oh, I can't work or you'll lose all your cash. I've made piles of money already off it, and I do it for 7 years straight. Yeah, a lot of people, their world gets smaller, smaller, smaller. They can't see options. They can't see possibilities. All they can see is less, 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 restrictions, restrictions. That's scarcity mentality. Thinking big, thinking of larger possibilities, asking the question, why can't this be done? If somebody else tried it, why couldn't they do it? Which is an important one before you blow a lot of money. And, you know, is there something they buggered up on and that's the reason they failed? You know, and once you've got all, you understand a situation highly, you can see if it is a true opportunity or not. But as people's world gets smaller, they're just spiraling downhill, you know, and they're essentially just going down the fucking plug hole. And this is the thing, you know, I think if he were to use what talents he had, and he could go out and sell a lot of stuff and make a lot of money, which I fully believe he could, he wouldn't be e-begging, and he wouldn't be getting so upset about donations because he'd have so much cash on his own. Now, he'd probably go back to the same old bragging self that I'm better than all of you because I'm friggin' loaded, blah, blah. But at least then he wouldn't be e-begging, you know what I'm saying? And once more, you know, he would have the chance to reach his full potential, and the more people that reach their full potential, the less people bleeding your and mine tax dollar. You know, and this is the thing. There's nothing worse than seeing someone who could be something, but they ain't that something because of some government bureaucrat or someone else, or some regulations or whatever that just cut them down. And, you know, people should be allowed to be all they can be in terms of enhancing themselves, enhancing the efforts they make, the good they do for the rest of society. Now, you may argue he's not doing much good for society. Well, you know, he hasn't opened up his full potential yet. And if he were to, that could change. You know, and I do think he needs a bit of help. You know, but I don't think he needs to be full-blown institutionalised. You know, and I do think that he does have real potential, and many people do, and most people don't see that they've got this real potential because they're on the run with scarcity mentality and their thing, and the world's getting smaller, and they just get more panicked and more frantic, like white trash idiots do. And, you know, it's going downward. It's going downhill. Everything's going down. If they thought big, if they tried their potential at doing a lot of things, you know, tried their hand at different things and see where they had potential, and they try to progress, then they're not going to be asking for handouts all the time, you know, and they're going to be working themselves out. And let's face it, when he's walking around junkyards showing stuff, I love going around those sort of places myself, you know, and people are happy, and he's not there friggin' slandering shit out of, you know, if he was to stop slandering the shit out of people in hangouts, and even start selling stuff at weekend markets, trust me, he would be a whole new person, you know. But just all the, it's one of these things, you know, he whinges about negativity and all that sort of stuff, but it's got a bit of a cycle with some of the trolls and whatnot that, you know, people bite at him when he bites at them, but often now there's just people constantly biting at him just to see if they can provoke a response. I hate to say it, but the guy is in some sort of a mental state where you ain't going to affect him, because by now he should have committed suicide 4 times over, given the amount of shit that he's copped. But it just is like water off a duck's back, you know, and I believe that's part of the schizophrenia. It's part of the delusions of grandeur. And possibly narcissism. But this is the thing, like, you know, I would rather see him do something useful for himself than e-beg. And wouldn't we all? I don't think he should be institutionalised, but by hell he definitely needs some sort of medication and a bit more guidance. And a bit more bloody hygiene. But he has potential, you know, and all of us do. All of us do. You know, and while I believe those of us who are not friggin' off the rails should always, you know, we should always try and better ourselves, those who are lower down on the scale should also try and better themselves. And I'm not saying, you know, some of them may need to be helped a little bit, but that doesn't mean they need money put in their pocket. Because the most interesting thing in life is that help does not mean giving someone more money. In fact, I've seen cases over here where the government, where they want to help a certain group, Aboriginals, and they give them more money, and it makes the situation worse. And there's so many times where help itself should not be money, but then it ends up being money. And this is the thing, you know, there's people that do need a bit of help to get along, but it's not financial help. And most of the time, there's so many areas where people are given financial help to fix the problem. And honestly, 80% of those times when they're given financial help, they shouldn't have been given financial help, but some other help to organise shit, sort shit out in one way or another, to, you know, basically help them get shit on the road. You know, it's like the whole idea of, if you give a man, I'm losing my bloody voice. If you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him how to fish and get him a fishing rod, then you've given him fish for life. You've given him food for life. And, you know, that's sort of what any help that he gets should be. I don't think he needs financial help endlessly. You know, I think he needs help to just get off his ass and open his eyes and widen his world, and take a few meds, but be given the potential to, you know, be a salesperson, because by hell he could be a great salesperson. And if you've read his resume, he already has been a salesperson. I reckon he'd be great at it. You know, it'd be an easy job for him. You know, 2 days a week, and he could float his own boat like that. But anyway, it's just my little thoughts on people's potential and institutionalising and versus not, and stuff like that.